Yeah. So hi everyone, and I'm Hemantika, and I have been an LFX mentee for summer 2021, and this was my officially first contribution to open source. And since then, I have also my first time learning Golang, and then like contributing here, and it was my start to say that I have been after my internship, I at Microsoft. I have been sitting idle for a month almost, and so after this, it gave me the confidence to go ahead and contribute to other projects. So this was the kickstart that I needed. And while I started with LFX, as I was very excited, I really couldn't like keep up my excitement to the level or perform to the expectations that I had, since I had to undergo a surgery and almost I was like bedridden for 1.5 months. It's been on 2.5 months right now. And even after that, I would say the community, it has been there to support me. I used to post very silly questions to Javier, who is my mentor, to Anthony, and then to even like Joe, that I reached out to everyone almost in the community to help me, and everyone has been there, be it through pair programming calls or like answering questions in the different channels. But yeah, this program is coming to an end. I'm a bit emotional as well, but this is just the start. And I think that as I go forward, as I get a grip over the language and Buildpacks project as a whole, I think that my contributions will even increase sevenfold. So yeah, that's it. That's how I would like to end. And I had also a blog published about the completion of the mentorship. I posted here in the chat. That's it from my side. Thank you.
It was so well written. I have to say, I really enjoyed reading. I read the whole thing.
Really amazingly written, Hemantika.
Thank you. It was long. Thank you for reading it to the end.
Yeah, it was a nice article. I read it as well, and hope you're well now. And
Yeah.
hope you get better.
Thank you, Ujjwal. I must say that you're doing a really nice contribution. Congratulations on becoming a contributor.
Thank you.
Anything.
Yeah, so second item is on me. So yeah, just like Hemantika, I'm also I've been she's LFX mentee. I was a Google Summer of Code student this time in summer with Buildpacks, and I was LFX Spring mentee as well for cloud native Kubernetes. But this time, as I was exploring cloud native technologies, I wanted to explore more, and so that's how I joined Buildpacks, and that's how it all happened. And I don't have words to express how amazing this community has been from the beginning, and the way this project was built. To whether it was Joe's regular guidance. Today, Joe is I think not in the meeting, but all just like I am, just like Himantaka said, like we all are beginners, so we ask silly questions. Like, and we whenever we ask silly questions, we usually feel like, is this even a question? Like we usually, but when we ask and when we are not only asking, we are also coming out of a comfort zone, I feel. And that's what Joe let me always feel. He was an excellent mentor, an amazing guide, always answered my questions, everything very quickly. And the most important part of any project, I feel, that I have learned during this entire journey was not completing the project, but the process involved around it. Like results usually aren't defined, because the progress is never ending. One task goes, then another task comes. There is always never ending progress. But the important thing is that how much we learn during the process. And having been now around 2 years into open source, previous year I was GSOC with RTMS, that was related to more embedded systems. This was my cloud native world journey has been from past 4 or 5 months, and I'm just loving this entire community as a whole, like Buildpacks plus CNCF. And because of, I think, this Google Summer of Code itself, we have got an opportunity to present a talk with Joe Kuttner in KubeCon as a panel discussion. I would let me find the link, and I will try to share that link as well. So we have a panel discussion where Joe is with me along with two other folks, One is Savita Raghunathan. She was the lead of Kubernetes 1.22 release team, and another LFX mentee that worked during the Kubernetes. So that was about that. My blog is also published, and thank you so much to everyone who read it. And I hope that I will continue the contributions after this as well. Thank you so much. I will really, really grateful to all of you. Thank you so much.
Cool. I
Awesome
have to
work.
say something. Yes, I have to say something to both of you. I read both blogs, and I was very surprised, not just for the hard work you did, but also for your, how can I say, how you can try to share all the grateful and all the good things you receive from all your mentees from Javier. For example, I read Imantica.
Yeah, right.
And yes, the other one from Mi Tunhai.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it good.
Yeah.
But for Joe, and then also you take some time to write something about Anthony. So I think that that's one of the most good things to share to other people that maybe it's thinking to join the program, or maybe they are afraid to share to some open source community. I'm just starting to do it. I was used to work for private companies and always working for private products, and I believe that the first thing everybody think when they want to share is everybody's scared. They're scared for working with some other guys you don't know, maybe you never see them, and everybody is scared to give that first step. So what was the most what I appreciate from your blogs is how you try to break that idea down, sharing that these people, it's human like you and me. They're not from other planets. They're normal human beings, and they can help you. You can learn from them, and you can teach them some stuff. So I appreciate that, and that's probably what I wanted to say to you, right? Thanks for that and for all the good things, and yeah, I hope you can keep in touch and helping us with this.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I also think that this community is doing really great. When I joined that time, I think Mrityunjay and I were the only students, but now seeing the overwhelming number of applications for LFX, I'm sure that it's just the start. We were really discussing if there was a shout out about this community somewhere, because really, like, the applications that came in, or like even the texts that we received about Buildpacks on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I think that it is the best community to be. And my, like, being the first community, I think, and like what Mrityunjay mentioned, that we never even thought twice before asking silly questions, because I asked very silly questions, and I think that was the amount of let's say, that's how much free we were with the community and the mentors. And for beginners or for anybody who is looking to get started with open source, it's definitely a kickstart.
I would say the same thing. Thank you so much, Joan. And I really appreciate your words, as well as the point that you highlighted, that our blogs might help lower the barrier for most of the students who are trying to join. So I hope that is what we even blog, as they say, many folks say in open source program, that blogs are also a way to contribute to open source, just like code. So I hope that we hope that this was a contribution in that direction. We hope that we will continue contributing like that. Thank you so much.
This is probably the most heartwarming
I know.
office hours we've ever had.
I think Anthony actually shed a tear over there.
Yes, you connect a few minutes later, but when I joined, everybody was giving, yeah, Anthony, come on.
I do appreciate it though. I really do.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have configurable previous image unpack.
Yeah, so I looked it again after yesterday's platform meeting. Does it suit the office hours meeting as well? It's related to pack, but seeing as code freeze is coming up, I thought it might be worthwhile to bring it here as well, if that's okay.
I see. Okay, so the link is to an issue, right? But the
It's
issue
closed,
has,
but I wanted to discuss something.
sorry, say that again.
The issue is closed, but I wanted to discuss something about it.
I see. Okay, yeah, I see a different issue, but that's not what we're talking about. The one that's linked below or description.
And then I'll put it in the chat.
All right. I mean, yeah, I think we could definitely, go from the emotional side into the technical side and start digging into that a little bit. Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, so I noticed yesterday that this is the part of the 0.21 milestone, and looking after the documentation, the only documentation that's present currently after the pack is compiled will be in the pack CLI documentation that's already present with this. That what already I wrote for the CLI flag. So it's basically just a flag description. But while working on the issue, I felt that not only I, but a lot of people who are familiar with Buildpacks also are not exactly clear on what the feature does. And uh, I feel like this has a limited use case. So until we document it, it's practically useless. So how do I want to go about documenting this? And if we can't document it in time, should we push it back to another release?
Interesting. Okay, I really like that question. I appreciate it. Thankfully, we do have people here that have a little bit more knowledge about how this flag interacts with the kind of the inner workings of the process. So Natalie, if you don't mind me calling you out on how the previous image works and how that changes and what sort of like use cases you could foresee where somebody would want to change the previous image.
Yeah, so I think this has to do with the kind of caching that we do, which involves reusing layers from an image that was built previously. So, let's say I do my first build and a bunch of layers end up in the app. On my second build, maybe not all of those layers have changed, right? So I can reuse those layers without having to re-export them, to the daemon or the registry. And so what that means is, actually for this feature is, let's say I want to build an image, but I want it to have a different name from the one that I built before, right? Without the configurable previous image, the analyzer will just, it's like, it flows through to the analyzer, right? So if you don't send the analyzer a previous image, it's just going to assume that the image you want to potentially reuse layers from has the same tag as the one that you're building. And that might not always be the case, right? So this is kind of just giving that additional knob to the end user that I can take advantage of, some sort of caching and speed up my builds without being restrained to not being able to choose a new name.
Okay, but in the pull request discussion, me and Anthony were discussing this with you, I think, that for the analyzer, we should hold back the changes. And so I ended up making the changes only in the creator phase. So does that somehow affect this?
Yeah, so the analyzer, and I'm gonna have to double check that I am remembering the most recent iteration of things. I think the analyzer supports a previous image flag as of platform 07, but Pack doesn't currently support that platform API version. So this is something we should probably have another issue to make these changes flow through to the analyzer when Pack supports 07.
Okay, so now if I'm understanding it correctly, the concern is that we have this previous image flag, which has a very specific, set of use cases. But in reality, Pack itself will only support this flag or feature if you're using a trusted builder, right? Or that workflow, right? Okay. So there's two questions I have, basically to, I guess, maybe make a more informed decision. So first off, Joel, did you kind of gather what the use cases are, and do you think that documentation for those use cases is something that's more or less achievable?
I'm still not entirely clear. One is the cache it equals true option not fulfilling the use case that Natalie mentioned of not re-exporting the layers. And secondly, I'm just not too familiar with architecture, fully understand how we're using this, so I can't comment any further.
I see. Okay. Okay. So that's good. We could keep working on that. Through some iteration.
Sorry, I was just reading the issue again. Now I remember. Okay, now I remember. So actually, this should be possible to do for previous platform API. It's just that the analyzer. I'm looking at this note from Emily. It says when the builder is not trusted, Pack should pass the previous image to analyzer, right? Because in previous platform API, the analyzer really only knows or cares about one image, and that's the previous image. In newer platform API, it can care about multiple images. It can care about the output image as well as the previous image. And so it's a little bit, the invocation of the analyzer will have to change so that you put the previous image in the right spot where it's expecting it. But I think if you're just passing this through as the first argument to the analyzer, you should be okay.
So that flag is available on the analyzer in platform API 06, I think is the latest we support.
It's not a flag, it's an argument. It's the only argument.
Oh, the argument. Okay. And was that the code, or was that code that was reverted? I guess maybe I'm confused because I did hear that there was a revert of code for the analyzer piece.
Yeah, it started working on the analyzer first, and then after the discussion that from API 0.6 won't support this, then it was discussed that I should focus on the creator for this PR and leave the analyzer for now.
But it sounds like we should be able to support it.
Yeah,
previously
now it's support. Now apparently we should.
On API 06. Okay.
Yeah. But when we move to 07, we should change the invocation so that we get the other benefits of telling the analyzer about the tag that we intend to export.
Okay, that makes sense. So I think we have two paths that I want to propose. One of them is implemented for analyzer as it can be done today, and then work towards providing documentation. That's one path. The other path, I think, would be, I don't want to say like reverting it, but we could definitely gate it as an experimental feature. And that way it's more of an advanced feature, and we could kind of essentially warn that it only works for the creator path when a trusted builder occurs. I would much rather prefer the former, the first option, and just kind of try to get it out the door. And I could work with you, Joel, to try to reason about some reasonable documentation for that.
Okay,
That
what
sounds-
about the third option? Wait for 07 and make everything right.
I mean, no matter what, the third option is going to happen, right? It's like what happens in the interim time that we're trying to discuss. Like the truth of the matter is we don't have 07 right now, right? And so
Yeah.
07 should be kind of like an epic of trying to migrate or move over to that.
Okay, I guess my question is, are we okay, or is someone here okay doing work knowing that it will be rewritten anyway when 07 comes out?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, well, that's it.
I think no matter what, it doesn't change too much unless I'm completely crazy, but typically lifecycle changes are just arguments and parameters, right? So it seems like a very minuscule change for an upgrade to say delay the whole feature for that upcoming work.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Okay, so I think I should be able to do the analyzer without too much trouble. And then we can work on the documentation after the analyzer part is completed.
Awesome. I like that plan. Let's see if we can get it done. Natalie, you still facilitating?
I guess. Sure. So I guess next and last on our agenda, we have an RFC that Halil and myself open. This is about enabling easier upgrades of Project TOML, given that app developers have freedom to choose which schema to use, and platform operators have, I guess, the additional burden of having to maintain compatibility with all these schemas unless we do something. So I think there were some thoughts that were discussed in the platform sync. Anyone wanna?
Yeah, so I guess I could start with a little bit, and a lot of it might actually come from one of the comments that Anthony made, where it was, it's a vague mention that this would be a new executable, as opposed to being part of the functionality of something like a prepare phase, right? Which I think we've discussed in the past, but we still don't have. And I just wanted to make sure that there was some sort of clarity around that. And then maybe, take up that discussion as part of this office hours. I have since replied to that, where ultimately I want to say that it doesn't matter to me as a platform implementer, whether it's its own executable or a function of the preparer. but it has to be an operation that has no additional side effects, right? So if it's for, let's say it's rolled into a prepare executable, then I need to be able to call the prepare with some sort of flag or something that tells it only do the transformation and do nothing else, right? And the reason for that is because through some of the workflows that we were talking about during our subteam sync, is we're gonna try to potentially leverage just this processing in certain platforms outside of, let's say, a very prescriptive workflow, if that makes sense. So I think I put some of the examples for like in Pack. We'll want to use this. Like, I guess maybe I'll kind of throw another thing in here, but I don't want to like go too far without finalizing that thought, seeing if anybody has any kind of reservations on or real strong arguments for why it should be part of another executable, like the prepare. Nothing.
I just had a question. I didn't have strong opinions, if you're asking me.
So maybe it's worth calling this out in the RFC, but my understanding whenever we talked about the prepare phase was that it, even if, even when we were saying, oh, prepare, it downloads Buildpacks, it like, whatever, forget all the things we talked about. But even at that stage, we said that it should be entirely configurable by the platform. So all of that functionality, you should be able to toggle on and off, right? So in theory, what you're saying, like, okay, I just want to prepare, literally just give me a schema I can parse, like that you just toggle on that one thing, right?
Okay. So it's not prescriptive like all the other stuff where you call an executable and it does a whole bunch of stuff for you. And yeah, so that makes sense. It's more like a utility, right? And that's the way I think about it. Yeah.
And this,
Cool.
like, in the interest of clarity, I guess, when we talk about a separate binary, like even right now, all the phases themselves are just symlinks back to the life cycle. There's one binary and there's a bunch of symlinks to save space. This would probably be no different.
Cool, that makes sense. I think it's really just the entry point that we're discussing at that point, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
There isn't a prepare RFC, is there? Which is why I think you were hand waving a little bit there, Natalie, of what we've said about it.
There was a branch of there was a PR, and then there became a branch on that PR. I don't know. There was never an official prepare phase RFC. And I think at some point when we started talking about utility build packs, we said there's a bunch of stuff that needs to get settled before we can come back and discuss prepare with more certainty. So that's why we're just talking about the schema conversion right now, because that's the thing we know we want.
Cool. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I guess there was another kind of like just opinion that I really want to voice because I felt like I've heard different thoughts. But again, speaking from a platform implementer's perspective, like it wouldn't be as valuable to me if I had this conversion utility, if I still had to parse it for very specific information that may or may not be deemed necessary. So some of the cases here would be things like the builder, right? So the life cycle doesn't necessarily care about the builder because it's already executing, but we would want that, right? And I would want to be able to access that key or flag in just one schema, right? As opposed to looking it up in the raw format, figuring out what schema it's using, then having to execute, the life cycle and all its processes, and then like get a different schema that then I'm really validating or using during another part of the process. So I think that kind of ties into, I think, a question that Terrence had was when we're talking about doing a conversion, right? It's converting all of the data, not just the data that it cares about or the life cycle cares about. Is that?
That was the intention. I think the intention was as in a lossless format, you know, putting one schema to the other, but retaining all the data, right? Am
So I
I,
wonder-
so I,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. But so maybe it's worth also calling out explicitly, you know, just in a way that Rebase, for example, currently, right, it doesn't expect to be run in the context of a builder. You can just run it on your host, right? I think this would sort of be the same, right? You wouldn't have to run the preparer or whatever we want to call it. You wouldn't have to run it in a containerized environment, at least not now, right? With
Yeah.
what it's trying to do. But one other thing that I heard, am I correct that like just getting back a TOML file isn't that helpful for you, right? Because then you have to parse the TOML file. Is that what you're saying? Would you like to get, you know, like just a string back if you pass it, like give me the builder and you just get the string? Is that?
No, that, sorry, maybe I miscommunicated. No, like the TOML is fine. It's more than fine, right? It's just that sort of expectation that it's in a very specific format, right? And I think you use the term lossless, right? I think that's something that isn't depicted in the RFC right now. And so I think that's what about these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
Okay, so
I think
I'm
one of
just-
the points was like not having to go back to the original user written like project descriptor, and that whatever is outputted here, like we in theory could like delete and throw that away and get all the information we ever wanted that the user wrote from this new thing that this binary is running. I think that's what Javier is basically asking, right? Like as a platform like Pack, as a platform like Salesforce or KPack or whatever, they can just use this new format because it's tied to the platform API, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to care what the user wants. And just being a lot more explicit about that was, I think, some of the discussions that we talked about in the subteam sync. And kind of just, I think probably the part that's a little more nebulous is like, as part of the reverse domain changes to accommodate some of the stuff I think like Salesforce was asking for, is like, what happens if a platform basically has tables? Like, does that stuff get copied over? What does that look like? I think it's easier potentially to write schema stuff for things that we care about as part of the Buildpacks project. But if I have other tables, do I have to go back to the other file as a platform?
That's an interesting question. I think,
or is that just split out into potentially a separate file, even like where this is the stuff that's owned by Buildpacks, then everything else kind of, here's this other thing where you can go read that.
yeah, let me go back and look. I think there were some assumptions made that the underscore stuff had a logical mapping to stuff that we had defined in the O1 schema and therefore is included in the platform schema. I think so, and then obviously everything under IO Buildpacks, because we know we care about that. Everything else, like you notice we have buzz equals ABC, like some random data, that is being thrown away in the current proposal, but we can update it to have, I don't know, some special table that's like other stuff and then just stick it under there. Does that make sense?
So is that's one thing I was going to ask for actually, is to see like what the mappings would look like, but it seems like that's what you already have right now in the how it works.
Yeah.
So that's saying, okay, so if I have this O1 schema, it'll translate into this O2 schema and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so buzz is gone. I was curious about metadata as well. That's not depicted that I could see. Actually,
It was. Yeah,
there's some
it should be there.
alignment there, it looks like, right?
Sorry.
So I see on their underscore metadata, there's CDN, but I don't see it on the O1. Or am I crazy?
Oh. If you look on line 161, it's saying that in schema 01, the metadata will map directly to metadata in the platform schema. For 02, the metadata maps to underscore metadata.
Wait, hold on,
I
let me
don't.
make sure I'm not crazy. So you said line 61. Are we looking at the same thing?
I think you said
161.
161 at the bottom. It's like mapping the tables. Is it worth in the how it works where Javier was before to show, I guess, the output of what that, maybe I missed it, but like you show examples of 0.1 and 0.2.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To
Buzz,
just show
but I
the
got-
output of that into what you're expecting it to look as. 'Cause
Yeah, we can do
these
that.
are just representations of the existing project descriptor, right? But there's actually like from what I'm getting from the bottom spec change, there's actually like the output format, which is not either of those two things, right?
Correct, right. The lines 137 to 151 are what we're proposing be the platform schema. And so, yeah, it doesn't have the same string values as the examples up above, but we could change that.
Is it worth just in the kind of thing above you have examples of 0.1 and 0.2 and maybe make them look the same as far as like field and values go, and then show like what that would look like in that thing?
Yeah.
I think that would probably just help illustrate.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that wasn't clear for me. So is that what we're calling it? Platform schema? Is that the term we're using?
It could be. That's what we're proposing.
Okay. So this is what the quote unquote platform would actually get. So after I give it O2, right, like a schema O2 project descriptor into this as an input, the output would look like this. This is what we're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is platform schema really just you're like ejecting out of 0.2 and you're like, we were actually really just like the 0.1 spec? I'm just looking
Yeah,
at
that's what I'm thinking. Like, I felt like we took a step back on this. What happens to the reverse domain stuff? Where does that go?
because they all map, right? Like I'm just reading the thing that Javier is screen sharing. Like it looks like you're just mapping spec stuff. I mean, it's fine, but the platform schema basically is 0.1. Isn't my understanding that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were going with the assumption that what does a platform need to care about stuff that doesn't relate to Buildpacks, right? So it's like kind of by assumption, everything is IO Buildpacks because the other stuff, I don't care. I'm a platform.
Well, I
What do I
think
care about Buzz?
I mean, I think the platform, I guess when you say platform, it's just like the platform as the people who are operating and running it may care, right, about that data.
Yeah.
But probably platform, the spec does not care as much, or platform like lifecycle.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, my proposal would be that we just have a separate table that includes the stuff that doesn't relate to Buildpacks, and we just copy it exactly as it is. You know, whatever the reverse domains are that don't pertain to Buildpacks, they can just go under that table.
Okay, so I think that's where my problem is that I stated earlier, right? Is that now I still have to care about the original schema format.
Yeah, but we'll never be able, like the the parser will never be able to take data from other domains and put it in some sort of like standardized format, because that is by definition like not spec'd by our project, and people will do what they want, right? So you either have to copy it in as it is or you throw it away.
But the domains themselves have a schema, right? Like the idea that that domains exist as opposed to metadata, right? That is part of the spec.
Yeah, so my proposal would be that we put them in under either directly as top level, tables, or we put them as a child of some table that's like other stuff that doesn't relate to Buildpacks, but like effectively retaining the structure that the user, that was provided. And we wouldn't flatten it or anything. We would just move it.
Yeah, I wonder in some senses if it's better to just have that as a extra file. Something like as a potential, like if I'm like a platform, like I'm thinking about just potentially the Salesforce use case, like I wrote a schema, I probably have a validator and thing that I wrote for users, like when people push code at like maybe on the CLI level to validate that their schema is correct. And I probably, if you put it under a different table, now the schema has changed to some degree. And so I'll have to then account for that. And I could potentially see maybe you don't want that at the top level in this other file, because then it gets intermixed with maybe like as you update this platform schema to account for more Buildpack things, you don't really want to deal with other stuff kind of stepping on how the platform wants to build out that schema. But I would potentially, as the platform who wrote that reverse domain thing, or maybe I pull on a schema from another project or something, they have a thing that's publicly available, right? Then I can just pull that thing in and use as is like any other user could. Does that sound crazy?
So like a separate file per top level domain?
Or just a separate file that's all the other stuff that's not Buildpacks potentially.
Well, in that case, I feel like you might as well just retain the original project TOML and like use it, right? Because if you're keeping the same schema, your validator is still going to look for that top level domain inside some file. What do you care if that file has extra stuff that's going to be totally ignored by your validator?
I think this is where, again, I feel like very conflicted. If I'm going to have to look for a very specific format or know the schema version of the initial project TOML, then I'm seeing very little value in this part of it, because I'm going to have a parser for that initial format anyway, right? So I'm going to have a parser for 01. I'm going to have a parser for 02. So I'm not sure that
but that's just for the top level domains that don't pertain to Buildpacks, right? And I feel like we can't get around that, right? We can't control what everybody under the sun is going to do with their schemas, right? So you have to have domain specific, something that has domain specific knowledge introspecting these files, right? I guess just the question is, do you put it at the top level, or do you put it nested under something, or you put it in a dedicated file? But like our Buildpacks parser is never going to be able to handle that stuff.
I don't know that handling is the term that I'm really trying to solve for. It's more of transposing it into a format that actually makes sense to the platform, and only that needs to be the case. And so, for instance, I actually like the separate file idea, right? That makes a little bit of sense to me. Or putting it in a separate location, right? That makes sense to me. I'm trying to like maybe get a more concrete example, and I think that's maybe where where a lot of our communication is out of sync. It's like we probably have to like actually go through the practice of like, how does this file gonna translate over to this? And once we do that, I think it'll say, okay, like this is gonna be super challenging, or hopefully come up with some solutions to some of those problems. Because theoretically, it sounds great. I'm just having a lot of reservation if I'm gonna have to process it twice.
Yeah, I feel like we agree on the same set of facts, but are drawing different conclusions from them. I'll just say personally that the idea of having a separate file per domain appeals to me, because then you're kind of like, let's say I have a, I don't know, you have like a Heroku specific thing, right? That's like just looking for the data that pertains to Heroku. You then don't have to bake logic into that validator or whatever that ignores all the other stuff, right? You just know that whatever you're handed, it contains all of the stuff for your top level domain, and that's that, right? So I guess then we get into questions of like, do you strip the domain off, or do you, like, what do you do? But I guess putting it in its own little box that's like, this is all the stuff that pertains to this domain feels useful.
I mean,
I don't
that
have
sounds
strong
great
opinions
to me
beyond that.
too, though, as well, right? Like, because then you could have validators, or potentially you can imagine a path where some part of the prepare phase that the platform controls is able to then even pull that stuff down and is able to run some of those things after they get split or something. I don't know, hypothetical prepare phase that's coming one day. But yeah, I mean, having it split sounds great too. But I just didn't want to add additional complexity to the implementation necessarily.
Do we have the domains defined or merged in? Like how the reverse domain schema works?
It's part of project descriptor 02, just like reverse domain.
Yeah, that looks merged to me.
Yeah,
But
I think
defining our groups, right? But it's not necessarily talking about the extensibility of being able to.
I'm pretty sure I wrote a section on this. I'm pretty confident I wrote a thing on this. I think one of the downsides of the implementation we went with, and maybe we want to, and maybe this is why we're talking about this now, is that I think if you want to go down that path, what would make it much simpler for lifecycle to implement this would be actually quoting the domain. Because one of the complications right now is like, you know that IO Buildpacks is the domain, right? But how do you actually know that if it's not like written somewhere, right? Like, how do I know it's like com.google versus com.google.foo or whatever, right? Like as the thing you actually want to split on.
Yeah, so the term domain is very loosely defined, right? Or not defined at all, actually. In that Google foo, like is foo a table of options, or is it the domain itself? So like basically every table of options becomes a domain by that definition.
So we would need changes to the project descriptor schema in order to implement this feature.
If you wanted it to work that way, I think, right? I think one of the assumptions right now is like we basically do domains based off of like the two, like just one dot, basically, right? I think that's.
So we don't support reverse subdomains?
I mean, it's not specified how long the domain is, right? So I think it's not easy for lifecycle to basically determine where to split.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was looking for, right? On how we defined the domains and how they operate as far as the extensibility of this document.
I think we basically said that anything that is not underscore or IO Buildpacks would be reverse domain notation, which is kind of up to whoever else was using it. Like it was left pretty wide open.
mean, for the time being, we could just put everything that's not IO buildpacks or underscore into a separate file. I personally am not convinced that that's much better than just retaining the original project descriptor, because of what I said about your validator or whatever is still going to have to ignore everything that doesn't pertain to its domain. So actually, maybe this will clarify things. If let's say we had like an io dot, whatever domain table, if that were to go in its own separate file, would you want to strip io dot whatever from the table name, or would you want that still to be present? Like I'm looking at io dot buildpacks dot group, like in the new file it would just be group, right? Is that desirable or is that undesirable?
I think in the, like, if I'm thinking for the non-IO buildpacks case, I wonder, I don't know. It's hard to say because you probably have validators that are built against the user implementation, right? Or by user implementation, I mean like how the user writes it, right? Like as a end consumer, like if I'm running a CLI validator to a thing that a user could run locally against, I mean, even for IO buildpacks, right? Like you would validate like the whole table and not just like, you would not expect it to be stripped.
Yeah.
But I could see why you would want to strip it, if that makes sense.
I just, without stripping it, if we're just gonna copy the data as it is into a new file and the validator is gonna have to ignore stuff anyway that it doesn't care about, I personally don't see the benefit of, why don't you just use the original project toml, because it's the same like series of steps you're going to have to do as a validator. But at the same time, if we want to make a nice clean separation between build pack stuff and non-build pack stuff, like we could. I've been taking notes. I can add some comments to the RFC if you want to think on it a little more and weigh in what you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest ask for me is probably just showing the example of the conversion, I guess.
Yeah, same here. I was gonna say that if we could have a more realistic example in the how it works and how that's really mapped over, at least that'll give us a clear understanding of what happens to the data, right? Especially the extra data, that's going to be the conversation piece.
Sounds good.
There's probably a whole world which is maybe out of scope of this RFC, like that whole splitting domain thing is actually really interesting, because like you potentially could imagine a registry that all maps to potentially too. It's just like you see like com.foo or whatever .toml, and that potentially maps to a validator that people are able to then pull down and validate against.
Are you thinking like XML schemas where you could declare the format?
I mean, that like potentially, but like probably wouldn't be that complex because the XML schema stuff is very thorough.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah. So looking forward to seeing a little bit more here, but interesting. I'll go back and I'll have to rethink through some of my stuff as well. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for writing this and everything to you and the other author.
I'll let him know.
Awesome. Cool. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.